The first month of the Overwatch League is done. So much has been learned, so much has changed, and the picture has become a lot clearer. With that said, let's regroup and make adjustments to the good old power rankings. I asked y'all a while back how often I should do power rankings this year, and monthly won out by a large margin. So let today mark the first monthly power rankings update of 2023. Here's how it's gonna go. On screen, I'll give you a team's overall and regional rank based on how they did in the month of May, and I'll indicate to you how many spots they dropped or fell compared to where I had them in my preseason rankings. And spoiler alert, there's going to be a lot of rising and falling, but hey, what else is new? With that said, let's see how things have changed, and more importantly, who has risen to greatness and who hasn't. With Chengdu Hunters missing in action, this will be a top 19 of course, and coming in at last place to the surprise of nobody is the Vegas Eternal. While they picked things up slightly in the last couple of weeks of qualifiers, they're by far and none, currently at least, the worst team in the league. 0-8 with one total map win. Vegas have completely lived up to their expectations in probably the worst way possible. They've shown they can pretty much only look slightly competitive when Vulcan's playing D.Va or Ramatra and when Malthal is literally one-tricking Hanzo. Any other composition, any other choices, and it's game over. The only guy that gives a damn on this team, at least what it feels like, is Dove, and man do I feel bad for that guy because he deserves way better based on how he's been playing, because as of right now, the Vegas Eternal are looking to be the next winless team in the Overwatch League. Speaking of winless teams, at 18th is the LA Valiant, of course. I desperately wanted to rank these guys higher, but I mean, 0-8 is 0-8. The Valiant actually showed some decent fight though, which is why they're obviously above Vegas. To go map 5 with Florida Mayhem is proof enough on its own that they are leagues ahead of the Eternal right now. They are in a slightly better tier for sure. They play around Seeker very well, and have generally shown some good results when playing the Ramatra Rush comp. It's come in burst, but the Valiant have shown steady improvement throughout the stage and look motivated to learn and get better. And if the trend continues, it won't be much longer before they get that elusive first win. But here in the present, they're still winless, which means that they've got to be 18th. And at the 17 slot is the Shanghai Dragons. It's not by a huge margin by any means, but most would agree that they're the worst team in the East. What the Dragons have shown us so far here in 2023 is about expected, but still pathetic nonetheless. The Fleta tank experiment has not been great. They're in desperate need of an upgrade at this position, especially for a team that has like the highest Winston pick rate in the entire league. When you lose to contenders teams, not once, but twice, there's no excuses. The Dragons desperately need to make changes to save themselves from the Coach Moon crack pipe, cause where it currently stands with these guys, they're probably only better than like 2 to 3 teams in the West at most. Please, for the love of God, get Viper and Hisu some help. Their backs are cracking as we speak. But not far behind the Dragons is actually going to be the Dynasty at 16, and I'll take the L on this one, boys. I severely overestimated Soul. Prophet and Void have mostly been the only ones doing anything during their matches, and considering that Belos Rhea also gets a lot of the playtime, it's mostly Prophet. The Toby coaching is not working its magic this year. This team looks straight up lost in Somber comms, and man has that backline been a letdown. There's glaring holes at quite a few places on this roster, and I don't see them clearing this up unless there's a significant meta change or they get some additional players. When you're Shanghai's one and only win in a stage, a team that lost to 2 contenders teams, it's safe to say that you too are in the danger zone. How the heck did this team beat Infernal in week 1? It like blows my mind. The Dynasty right now unfortunately suck, and I'm very disappointed. Number 15. The Toronto Defiant. Oh Lord help me. Another former contenders dynasty doing absolutely nothing together in the Overwatch League. American Tornado has felt more like an American Breeze. For a team hailed as the pride of NA contenders, we just haven't seen that potential out of this group. And what's sad is that all of these players showed that they can indeed stack up to Overwatch League competition thanks to their rookie seasons. What the heck happened, man? It makes you wonder if the pressure is potentially getting to them. They can't seem to find their groove, especially at flex DPS and main support. It's been very unfavorable for them. But what's maybe more alarming than all of that is how they've performed with a weak strength of schedule. You basically had 2 free wins this stage thanks to Vegas and Valiant, and they've stood no chance against basically all of the real teams. Imagine what happens when they don't have those freebies in the next stage, when the schedule gets harder. The London and New York games are pretty eye-opening when you look back. I hate to say this as an American rooting for Team USA in the World Cup, but Toronto, aka most of their roster, is not very good. Maybe this franchise is just cursed to be mid for all of eternity. At 14, I'm going with the London Spitfire. It triggers me, really infuriates me to have to put them this high. For starters, I look horrible for rating them as high as I did in the preseason, but on top of that, I am angry I even had to put them at 14th with how they played in like 7 out of 8 of their matches. Dive metas, playing Skyrip on lethal, subbing out Sparker completely, terrible execution. They've mostly refused to play their comfort as well, and it's just costed them dearly with one of the worst records in the league so far. London have made me mauled into the next dimension when I watch them play. It hurts to rate them this high, like really. There's no other choice, but it's still painful. Although, with their win against Toronto, the copium is starting to come back. It seems like maybe they finally learned their lesson that the OG lineup and playing rush compositions are the key. There's potential to turn this around based on what I saw in that final week. Obviously, we still need to see more, but it's a start at least. Okay, now we're on to the next handful of spots where things start to get very confusing and extremely complicated. The mid-table is a nightmare to navigate, and for all intents and purposes, consider a lot of these guys on equal ground in their own tier rather than by specific numbers. The math doesn't really add up when looking at who beat who, it's kind of just this endless circle, so instead I'll try my best to rank these next handful of teams based on how they've done in like the competitive sense. And starting off at number 13 is the San Francisco Shock. Dear Lord, give me strength for this one. It feels incredibly wrong to do this, and Shock Faithful are going to hate me forever, but I found it very hard to rank them higher than 13th just because of how they've done overall. Because when you look at the Shock's general performance this stage, it has been a disappointment. I literally dropped them 12 spots compared to the preseason, for crying out loud. A team with extremely high expectations coming into this year has been a mediocre gatekeeper at best. Now, in all fairness to the Shock, I'd say their schedule was pretty hard, and there were some other unfavorable things going on with them, but if you're supposed to be a contender, you just shouldn't be getting 3-0'd and 3-1'd in all of your losses. And think about who they've beaten so far. The Valiant? The Defiant? A worse version of alexyOWL than what we see in present day? And considering that all of these matches were at least partial struggles, it goes without saying that the Shock don't have any real feats right now. The team feels very unorganized. I overrated them tremendously, and they deserve to be mid-table at best until further notice. Number 12, the Dallas Fuel. Yeah, this one also hurts very badly, as I had some pretty high hopes for the defending champs, but unfortunately they're off to a bit of a slow start. They've started to maybe pick things up a bit here in the late weeks of the spring stage knockouts, but not even being in contention for top 3 in the East right now is a letdown. As the champions of the league from last year, you should be capable of something like that at the minimum. Instead, what we've gotten is a mid-record with mostly uncompetitive losses against the real teams of the East, which struggles on all of the best meta picks. The Fuel find themselves in this weird middle ground right now. They're clearly better than Dynasty and Dragons, but clearly worse than everybody else. I'm confident that they could beat like a good number of teams in the West as well, which is why I have them 12th, but with no real impressive wins to their names as of right now after 5 weeks, you just can't put them any higher than mid. Number 11, the alexyOWL. Ugh, I honestly cannot believe I'm uttering these words right now, but there's really no choice. New York have definitely defied the expectations placed on them so far. A team ridden with problems internally, an awful early season execution has started to figure some stuff out. The Changoon crack pipe lives on, baby. The alexyOWL have found a way to win 3 games this stage and make the knockouts, which is a lot more than I and a lot of other people were expecting of them. The The talent that gave this team upside to begin with has really shown out. The DPS line, very serviceable. Kellen, inconsistent but still pretty good, and Creative has been on a different level at the flex support as perhaps one of the most underrated players in the league right now. And I love the fact that just in general, this team is not a free win. It's a very competitive roster. Like outside of week 1, they've taken at least one map in every single series that they have played, win or loss, including 2 heartbreaking map 5s that they definitely could have won. There is a world right now where they could be 5-3. However, I've decided to place them this low, even below a Justice team they've just recently beat, because their peak really isn't anything special. You had your big win over the Justice, yeah, but I really think Justice were more prepared for Gladiators rather than New York that week, and their other 2 wins came from the Valiant and Vegas, aka the 2 worst teams in the league, and you gave maps to both of them. And in spite of their competitive nature, most of the teams they played well against have also been struggling. The Titans and maybe the Justice are like the only examples of this not being true. If we're basing the rankings week by week, they'd obviously be a lot higher, but this is factoring in the entire month of May, and I think if we compare what they did to some of the other teams above them, they just fall a little short. Now beginning the top half of the power rankings, at the 10 spot is the LA Gladiators. To be honest with you, they should probably be even higher than this. I'd say like top 8 bare minimum, just because they have shown a pretty high peak so far. They got a big win against the Florida Mayhem, which automatically makes them pretty qualified, and they've also shown to be a threat thanks to their crazy DPS line and a crazy sneaky back line, and I think just any team in general with Kevster on it has to be ranked decently high. But after the week they're coming off of, plus some of their other poor performances from the stage against high-level opponents, I just can't get myself to do it. Every loss they had so far was a 3-0, and to be completely honest with you, very few of their wins were extremely dominant. Even a team like Vegas at least gave them some trouble. Like, Glads are capable of crazy peaks just because of the players they have, but because they're far from perfect and there's a lot of mistakes that they make in their overall stage, I'd argue that they're not as impressive as they probably should be. Again, Glads likely should be higher, but I think that loss to the Justice has made everything make 0 sense, so this is where we're putting them for now. Speaking of the Justice, they're actually going to be my number 9 team in the rankings. If I'm being honest with you, I think the primary reason why they're here is because of that win against the Gladiators. I feel like people would be mad at me if I put Glads above them based off of that. But also something that I prefer about this Justice team over the Glads, despite maybe having a weaker roster, is that their wins are always decisive. 3-0s over the Shock and Glads shows proper execution and fundamentals. When they win, they don't leave any doubts. Unfortunately though, they can't go any higher because they too suffer from some notable inconsistency. For every decisive win, there's also a decisive loss. The alexyOWL game definitely proves my case. When they're unprepared, when clearly they have their sights set on someone else, it's a murder and not in their favor. Every loss they've suffered, just like LA, has been a 3-0. You just can't be in the upper echelon with inconsistency issues like that. It's not possible. Maybe if they make the midseason madness, that could change that. But for now, they're capping out at number 9. Moving into the number 8, I once again cannot believe I'm saying this, but I'm going with Vancouver. The main reason I went with the Titans as the top middling team is because they've shown the best consistency compared to Dallas, Gladiators, Justice, Shock, and New York. Their record might be worse than some of these guys, but their competitive nature is arguably better. Aside from the Atlanta series, there has not been a single match they haven't been in. When they win big. And when they lose, they never fail to make you earn it. They nearly took both the Mayhem and the Outlaws to a map 5. We're talking 2 of the best teams in the Overwatch League. The Titans absolutely come to play week to week, and I love how scrappy they are. And hey, just for a little cherry on top, they 3-0'd the Uprising, so they do have that feat of beating a great team under their belts already. They punch above their weight class pretty often, and I think combined with that consistency, they deservingly claim a top spot inside the top 10. Okay, We did it. We're out of the confusion zone. We're in the clear. At the number 7 spot, I'm locking in the Guangzhou Charge. The Charge have definitely surpassed expectations for me. They're in contention for that top spot in the East on a week-to-week basis. The Charge got off to a pretty hot start this year and have managed to claim the top record in the East through qualifiers. The team is looking good. They're very well-rounded, and they have an obvious leader in Choi Se-won, who might be the best DPS in the APAC region. And so far, the Charge have lost just 2 games, both of which came in a map 5. Needless to say, they're a tough team to crack. However, they're landing at number 3 in the East as of right now, since they failed to beat the other top teams in their region in the last couple of occasions, and have generally cooled off since their hot start and don't look quite as dominant. Other teams have outperformed them when it truly matters recently. Now, by next week, this narrative could completely shatter. I think that the top guns in the East consistently fluctuate, but here in the present at least, here at the end of May, they're clearly 7th place for me. At number 6 is going to be the rival Hangzhou Spark. The Spark stage has been interesting. It started off pretty rough. The expectation for them coming into this year was they would dominate the East, and that just hasn't been the case so far. The Somber comp has not been a strong suit for them, and they're trying to figure out how to adjust. They've been very beatable so far, hence why their rating has tanked a little bit since the preseason. However, they're still quite good. They only had 2 bad games, really. They're still a relatively consistent squad. But more importantly, they're showing a strong end-of-month push. They're on a bit of a winning streak, their knockout play has been solid, and I'm a believer they may have figured out their niche in that Charge series. They started to give Shy more freedom on his hero picks, and the results look drastically different. The tide is turning at a pivotal part of the spring. The second half of the East, aka the more important part where everything's on the line, has gone the way of the Spark, and it's cause they've played so much better when it really matters that I rate them highly. We've seen this story play out way too many times to ignore. Gushue, Shy, and Leaf become different beasts when under pressure. West or East, it does not matter, no team is safe. Spark always get better with stakes, and I think that if they can beat the Charge again, I have no reason to not place them highly. Starting off the top 5 is the Boston Uprising. I can't say I expected to have them this high after their rough start, but here we are. There were some serious clouds of doubt surrounding this franchise for a long time. Are they going to fall apart from the inside out? Do they just have an easy schedule? The answer seems to be a resounding no. The Boston Uprising have gotten stronger by the week, and they seem to be peaking at the right time. There's been some excellent performances all stage out of Decay and Twilight, and Birdring seems to be finding his form from a couple of years ago. And outside of that one loss to Vancouver, they've been consistent across the board with dominant wins on the regular. And if you're a Boston fan, you're feeling pretty good after witnessing them take a map off Atlanta Reign. Considering the Reign have lost 2 maps all season so far, this is a big-time indicator that they are capable of fighting the top dogs in the league with this kind of roster. Boston have proven themselves in my eyes. You can't question the legitimacy of them right now. There's obviously still a long way to go, but from my point of view, Boston is certainly on the rise and one team you definitely don't want to mess with. Speaking of rising stock, coming in at my number 4 slot and number 1 in the East is the Soul Infernal. Admittedly, they're better than I thought. The acquisitions made at Flex Support and Tank have paid dividends for this squad. Skewed has been thriving with a lot more of a spotlight on him than what he's accustomed to, and Mag seems a lot more comfortable than he did with the Justice. The question mark signings are paying off, and I think that dangerous DPS line on top of it has molded Infernal into one of the most competitive rosters in the Overwatch League. Their ceiling is quite high, and their clutch factor is the best it's been in years. The worst things I've gotten was probably in week 1. Their lone loss of the season so far, and you could probably chalk that one up to nerves more than anything else, as 9 times out of 10 in their current state, they're probably beating Dynasty. Every other game has consisted of dominance or good responses to adversity. They have been undefeated since the very first week. They've beaten every other legitimate contender in the East. Spark, Charge, even O2 Blast. They are the undisputed number 1 in the East until we are proven otherwise, and they just might be a threat to some of the Western teams as well if they do make it to the midseason madness. With this kind of star power and motivation at their hands, anything is possible. Number 3. The Florida Mayhem. Was there ever any doubt? They're by far and none one of the most dangerous teams in the league. The Pro-Am was most certainly not a fluke. The Mayhem are for real, and their core continues to level up by the day, with a major emphasis of course being placed on Checkmate, Someone, and RuPaul all rising to stardom. The Mayhem have shown they have all the tools necessary to make even the scariest teams in the league shake in their boots. That matchup against the Outlaws last week is all you really need to know. If they can keep it that close with one of the strongest teams in the league, one of the biggest title contenders, I think it's safe to say that they're likely in that same range. Florida are no longer this up-and-coming team. They have most definitely arrived, and I think they're going to be a tough matchup for just about anyone. Because they didn't actually beat the Outlaws, plus the strange blunders to Gladiators and to a certain extent Valiant, they're not consistent enough to be in that top 2 percentile. Now, with all this talk about Outlaws in mind as we move away from the Mayhem, it goes without saying that they're going to be the ones to occupy number 2. Last week showed us they're definitely not a lock for this placement by any stretch, but up until this point, they have been the common consensus league runner-up. They may not blow everybody they play out of the water, but they always find a way to keep control of the series and they don't let it get out of hand. They're definitely one of the clutchest teams in the entire league. Their entire starting lineup put things into a completely different gear if things even get remotely close. Their mechanical brilliance can outshine even the biggest stars of the league. They're one of the best teams in the current meta, and they're rocking many of the best players in the world. At 6-1, they've beaten many of their toughest challenges in the West already, outside Atlanta Reign, which mind you was a pretty close match. That alone makes them the obvious number 2, I'd say. They're pretty much the only threat to the clear-cut best team in the present day, and they might be your biggest hope of seeing an upset in the mid-season madness. Now, with that said, they've got nothing on number 1, which is, of course, Atlanta Reign. I already spoiled it, but you knew it was coming. At 8-0, with 2 map losses and 26 tries, that's all you need to see. The Reign have made the first half of this season look like a complete cakewalk. They cruise to the top record and the top seed in the mid-season madness, and they're sitting pretty as the league's most terrifying team and the current favorites to win it all. They've crushed numerous respectable teams like they're nothing, and have clutched up anytime there's the slightest bit of resistance. The Reign have a real super team over there. They are completely taking control of this league with a top roster in a Sombra meta that they are dominating thanks to Lip. I mean, he is by far and none the current MVP favorite, and it's not even up for debate, and that's on top of the fact that they have a dummy-loaded backline and Stalker who's playing some excellent Overwatch. As of right now, there is not a single team in the league that can stand up to the Atlanta Reign, and at the rate they're going, they might just run away with this. They just can't get complacent, and they should be fine. Aside from that, there's really not much to say. The Reign are just really good. No criticisms to make. So with that said, that completes my end of May power rankings. A lot of this is obviously messy, but I do hope that you'll understand that I'm trying my best in a pretty impossible situation. If you enjoyed my suffering and my bad takes, I do hope that you'll like this video, subscribe to the channel if you're new, and leave a comment down below of your own power rankings to compare. And until next time, this is ATP, signing out. Peace.